3 days ago, nobody handed you meat. Across 150 forager societies, the documented enforcement sequence ends the same way: gossip, shaming, ostracism, and then execution. Banishment was not the final stage. It was the second to last. So what actually happened when an ancient human got kicked out? You're probably picturing a dramatic confrontation, an announcement, a moment of public judgment, someone pointing toward the tree line. That picture is wrong. In 2003, Dr. Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA published a neuroimaging study in Science that changed how researchers understood social exclusion. Participants played a virtual ball-tossing game called cyberball and were progressively excluded by the other players. The anterior cingulate cortex, the brain region that registers physical pain, became significantly more active during exclusion than during inclusion, correlating directly with self-reported distress. The finding in plain terms: the brain does not distinguish between a broken bone and being left out. Both register in the same tissue, processed by the same neural architecture, experienced as the same category of threat. In human terms, the pain of ostracism is not a metaphor. It is the same signal. And that signal evolved for a reason. In the ancestral environment, being left out of the group threatened survival as reliably as being struck. Gossip wasn't social noise. It was a distributed surveillance system, the only behavioral database available in a world without writing. In a band of 20 to 150 people, a person who cheated on a food share in the morning had their reputation updated across every group member by evening without a single formal proceeding. This wasn't just talking. It was real-time enforcement infrastructure with no hierarchy required. The graduated escalation sequence wasn't arbitrary. It was a deterrence cascade. Each stage both punishment and warning of what followed: gossip, then shaming, then ostracism, then execution. The counterintuitive detail: permanent banishment was often considered more dangerous than killing. A surviving outcast knew the group's food caches, movement routes, and alliances. An expelled individual was a potential threat. Execution, in this calculus, was not more extreme than ostracism. It was frequently more pragmatic. This wasn't just cruelty. It was risk management. A distributed justice system with no courts, no judges, and no appeals process, running entirely on collective memory and accumulated reputation. Nobody says anything to you. That is the point. The group moves. You follow at the same distance you have kept for 3 days, close enough to observe, far enough to feel the edge. The food sharing happens around a fire you are no longer invited to approach. Your anterior cingulate cortex registers this the same way it would register a blade. The signal is accurate. Something is destroying you. It is just doing it slowly. The mechanism works because it has to. A group of 30 people cannot afford a prolonged conflict. The graduated enforcement sequence: first, your reputation adjusted quietly across the network, then the public shaming, now the exclusion from sharing, is designed to give you multiple off-ramps before the terminal options are reached. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm, synthesizing evidence from over 150 forager societies at the University of Southern California, documented that the widest geographic distribution across all world regions belongs not to ostracism but to execution, meaning that when groups ran out of patience, they ran out of patience completely. The off-ramps are real, though. Reintegration was possible. The mechanism: conspicuous behavioral correction, visible food sharing with those you antagonized, deference to those whose status you challenged, sustained self-subordination over days or weeks. The group's enforcement system was not designed to produce permanent exclusion. It was designed to correct behavior. One more capable adult back in the resource pool was worth the cost of watching them closely. The ostracized individual, meanwhile, was experiencing neurological distress so acute that compliance was not a rational calculation. It was pain relief. The cold at the edge of camp is not different from the cold at the center. But you feel it differently now. The fire is the same fire. The distance is everything. The shift arrived roughly 10,000 years ago with urbanization. In a forager band, ostracism was a precision instrument, targeted at a specific person, for a specific behavior, administered by a community that knew every detail of what they had done and had a direct stake in the outcome. The expelled individual knew what they had done. They knew who had decided. They knew what correction looked like. In cities of thousands, social exclusion became anonymous. The graduated enforcement sequence, the 5-stage correction mechanism that gave targeted individuals multiple chances to adjust, was replaced by institutional systems with no memory of the individual and no mechanism for reintegration. What was lost was not the punishment, but the legibility. Ancient ostracism told you exactly what was wrong and exactly what would fix it. The modern vulnerability, contemporary social exclusion carries the same neurological cost it carried in the Paleolithic. The same anterior cingulate cortex activation, the same pain signal, but now operates in environments too large and too anonymous for the correction mechanisms that once made exclusion survivable. The pain is the same. The exit is gone. You get a rejection email with no explanation. They received a silence that told them everything. You were excluded from a system with no memory of who you are. They were excluded by people who remembered every meal you had shared and every one you hadn't. You experienced the pain of rejection with no pathway back. They experienced the same pain, and the pathway back was built into the system that inflicted it. The group didn't kick people out to be cruel. It kicked them out to stay alive, and it left the door open because it needed them to come back. This content is intended strictly for educational and documentary purposes. All historical, anthropological, and neuroscientific references are drawn from peer-reviewed research and named academic sources.